Before I start, I'd like to do an Acknowledgement of Country. So on behalf of those present, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we now meet. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I also pay my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of Australia and hope the pathway towards reconciliation continues to be shared and embraced. Welcome everybody. Before we start, I thought I'd introduce the team. A little bit about the Neville Bonner Award, some background when it started and what we currently do to raise the profile of the Neville Bonner Award, and talk a little bit about how it's part of the citation and awards category, and then go through the nomination process, which is a little bit different to what we've had in the past, and then a few words about the assessment process, and then open up for Q&A. I hope to be talking the whole time so that you have an opportunity to ask questions. So I've got a team of two that help me manage the Australian Awards. So Angeline Sim is the awards team manager and Jin Yi is the awards team coordinator. So usually if you've got a question, one of my team members will be responding to that question, and we have sort of a generic email address that we can all sort of respond to. But the two key people that are sort of driving doing all the sort of background work to make sure the awards are happening. And just to let you know that the awards will continue for this year, so that is great. We've got government funding till the end of this year, and then it's up for negotiation around what's happening next year. I shouldn't say up for negotiation, I think a decision has been made, but we'll see ways in which we could perhaps possibly secure the awards going forward. The Bonner Awards was introduced in 2002 as part of the Teaching Excellence Award, and Neville Bonner was the first Indigenous Australian to sit in Parliament, who passed away in 1999. He's an elder of the Jagera people, and he was an Indigenous activist and political conservatist. And I'm suspecting that the crowd that I've got with me today would know a lot more about Neville Bonner than what I do. The Neville Bonner Award is part of Citations Awards and also our Teaching Excellence Awards. And we're really looking to see how individuals have demonstrated their contribution to Indigenous education, and it's only for Indigenous teaching staff. So we are hoping that you can help us in that process of identifying some great Indigenous teaching staff that could be suitable or nominated for such an award. Over the past 3 years, we've had a very low number of nominations for the Neville Bonner Award. So the purpose of today is really try to raise awareness of this award and to try and increase the number of nominees. And this is where we really need your help. So in 2020, last year, we had 3 citation nominations and 1 was awarded from a team from the University of Notre Dame. And in 2018, we had 2 teaching awards nominated, with 1 award granted to the University of Technology in Sydney. So you can see the numbers are pretty low. So we really want to try and increase these numbers, and we want to make a concerted effort this year. It'd be fantastic to have at least these numbers in the double digits. That would be a great achievement for this first year. So what we're trying to do, or what we are doing to try and raise the awareness of the Neville Bonner Award, is to sort of increase our communication and our dissemination. So we're using social media and we're advertising on the UA website, but this is another forum that we thought is let's talk to people that are directly involved with what's happening in embedding Indigenous perspectives and education in the curriculum. And you would be probably aware of some great work that's happening in your institution. So if we can raise that awareness and build a relationship with this group of people, then hopefully we'll have more chance of people being nominated, and we can also support them in that nomination process. So we want to increase our communication and dissemination using the social media is one, and you would have seen a post just this week announcing that we are advertising and looking for nominations for Neville Bonner. We're looking at establishing connections with institutions through the Indigenous centres, through the PVCs, through Associate Deans, Indigenous, academics and staff, and this is our first port of call here. We're developing brochures. We've actually already developed a brochure, and we can share that through the chat if you haven't already seen it. And we've got brochures, and we've created some videos from past Neville Bonner recipients as well. We're promoting our support services. So through the Australian Awarded Universities Teachers Network, we've got a mentoring program. We've got a list of mentors that are willing to help academics that are wishing to apply for an award. So it'd be great if we could utilise that and offer that service to Indigenous staff wishing to apply for a Neville Bonner Award. And then the last thing that we want to do is establish an assessment panel that has got Indigenous perspectives represented on that assessment panel. So there's some of the strategies that we're moving forward, and would really welcome any further suggestions that you might have to help us raise the profile of this award, and you might want to pop them in the chat. Take some feedback at the end. So as I said, the Neville Bonner Award is part of the Citations Awards and also the Awards for Teaching Excellence. So with the Citation Award, we actually ask participants to select one of the disciplinary categories. So are they teaching in health, or are they teaching in the creative arts, or are they teaching in engineering? And then they can select whether they are going to apply in the category of an early career, or applying for a Neville Bonner Award, or applying because they are a sessional staff member. So we're hoping that they would choose a discipline and then say, okay, and I'm going to go for a Neville Bonner. And you'll see that there's a category called multidisciplinary. And we notice that in universities, they're moving towards creating degrees and curriculum that has interdisciplinarity, cross-disciplinarity and transdisciplinarity as well. So we've got that additional category there where there might be something you think, this is a degree that crosses health and education. We're going to put it in the multidisciplinary sort of category. And we've also have got the Neville Bonner as part of the Awards for Teaching Excellence. So again, we've got our disciplinary categories, and then if there's an Indigenous teaching staff that would like to apply for that award, they would tick the Neville Bonner Award for Indigenous Teaching. And for each of those awards, there's a set of criteria. For a citation, you just have to address one of the 4 criteria that are listed there. Or for a teaching award, you would have to address each of those 4 criteria. Once we've identified people that could be nominated, we've got a nomination process. And what we've done, how we've changed this nomination process is, first we wanted to raise awareness of the Australian Awards for University Teaching. And we're inviting each of you to complete an online form where you would enter or nominate someone who's an Indigenous educator that you believe is doing a great job. And we only ask for a couple of sentences, name of the person, and then possibly we can then reach out to that person and provide them with the resources that we have available that they could possibly use if they're interested in using them as well. So raising awareness of the awards is the first step, and identifying potential nominees would be the next step. I can see someone's got their hand up. Hang on, I'll just see if I can see who that is. Simone.
Hi, sorry, it's Simone from Flinders Uni. And I was just wondering, in the nomination process, it's very much looking at individual academic staff, but we often have teams who are leading either Indigenous studies programs or primary health care, medical programs. So is are team nominations available? Absolutely. And are they seen as one nomination, or is it, say there's 3 in that category who work together in a topic that is really potentially up for nomination? Is that one nomination, or it would 3 nominations?
Yeah, no, it'd be one nomination, and you would list the 3 people.
Okay, great.
1999, we had a team win the Australian Award. So that was one nomination, but there were a team of 3 that actually won the award. The first step is just to provide us with some names. Then we'll have a list of names, and then it's really to reach out to those people that have been nominated and say, look, you've been identified or been nominated for someone in your institution to consider applying for a Neville Bonner Award. And we've got a number of resources that we can help you to put that application together if you're interested. And we can also provide them with a mentor. We've got a list of mentors from the different institutions. We could probably even find a mentor from their own institution that could help work with them. And then we just go through the normal nomination process, where you would then, register the nominee through a portal, put in their details and then upload the submission based on the dates that are listed on this slide. But we've introduced this first part of the nomination process just to get a sense of, who's out there, because people aren't putting themselves forward and they might feel like, oh, I'm just never going to get an award. So it's nice to have people in more senior positions like yourself to sort of identify who are your superstar educators that are really working to embed those Indigenous perspectives in the curriculum, identify them, and then we can reach out and sort of help them through that process. So just a little bit about the assessment process. So there's a 3 sort of step process when we're assessing any nomination for any of the awards. So there's an individual, we have a group of assessors, we have a pool of assessors, and we get them to individually assess their nomination. Then we form teams, and then they come together as a team and they discuss how they've ranked and why they've ranked and provide a rationale for their ranking. They have an opportunity to discuss that with their team and change their rankings if they want to. And then they provide a set of recommendations for the awards committee that looks over those recommendations, and then the award committees then recommend to Universities Australia who they believe should be recipients of the award. So that's in brief, the assessment process. And I'm opening it up for questions. So I'm really hoping that you've got some questions or comments or any feedback about what we're doing.
I looked at the discipline categories in the both discipline categories. Indigenous studies doesn't appear there, and I'm wondering about the thinking behind having particular discipline categories. I'm just thinking when we applied for our award, we wouldn't have met the criteria really because we weren't working in a particular discipline.
Right. So
working across discipline, maybe that's multidisciplinary.
Yeah. Multidiscipline. That's why we put it in there.
Okay.
And we went. Discipline categories were derived from the fields of education provided by the Australian government.
I just wanted to ask about the support offered by the AAUT team. And what's the expectation of a candidate or applicant using that support, given that, every institution has some kind of centre of learning and teaching that offers a whole range of things and, essentially manages the grant process. So could you maybe say a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. We do expect institutions to support their academics, but sometimes they might want a perspective from someone outside of their institution. So that's why we've set up this mentoring scheme, so someone could provide cast an eye and provide them advice in terms of perhaps the evidence they might use, perhaps the way they would sell themselves or describe the impact of their work. And most of our mentors, if not all of them, have been past award winners. So that's where the difference would lie. So I know that in the institutions we have teams that guide and help support applications. Our mentors are past recipients of awards that have gone through the process, might be able to share their applications so they get a sense of how things were done. So it's a different sort of additional support, I should say.
And is there any specific advice being given to those centres of teaching and learning? Given that the number of applicants or the volume of applicants hasn't been very high, I'm wondering if that's a case of people not kind of getting through that level in the past.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, Gary, because we provide and administer the awards, but it's really up to the institutions to encourage their staff to apply. And what we can see from the numbers is perhaps that encouragement hasn't been extended to the Indigenous teaching staff. And how many Indigenous teaching staff have we got? We've probably got low numbers. Are people reaching out to Indigenous staff? And look, having worked now in several universities, it's not customary for senior academics to really reach out to academics, and you have to identify yourself. And what I'm trying to do is almost change the culture a little bit, where the senior academics, are aware of this and say, hey, this would be a great opportunity for someone in my area to apply. And this is why I'm starting off with this group. Let's have this conversation and how can we change that? We are running a set of briefing sessions to put an application together, what forms of evidence would be valuable. I hope that answers your question, Gary. Okay, we've got another question, Darlene.
Hi, I'm not totally clear on all of this. I'm not sure whether this is actually an awareness raising exercise, or is this an exercise where the universities are authorising particular individuals that they want to nominate for these awards, and you're then going to provide supplementary support for those individuals to prepare their best application for consideration for the award? So I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure of how it all fits together. At UWA, we have our own internal processes, right, and selection processes that people have to go through for these awards, and that includes any nominations to the Neville Bonner Awards. So yeah. I'm not quite sure of the fit with the university's internal processes and what you're proposing now. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. So the universities have their own internal processes, and we have to follow those internal processes, right? So this is not bypassing those internal processes, but having worked and having led centres which ran the awards, it was usually call for applications, and we've seen this, and the data shows us this in the past 3 years, that we've had a really low number of nominations in the Indigenous for the Neville Bonner Award. So what we thought we would do is maybe let's change the approach. We still need to follow the internal processes. Absolutely, that does not change. But why don't we, as leaders who are not in a learning and teaching centre but are leaders in the sort of Indigenous, either Indigenous institutions, or see if we are aware of some Indigenous teaching staff that we can nominate, so that my team can reach out to them and say, we think that you have been nominated for a Neville Bonner Award. We would like to provide you with some support so that you can put together something and take it to your internal staff to make them aware that you have got the capabilities and the story right to go forward. That's sort of what we're saying.
So potentially we could actually nominate any and all Indigenous staff to actually participate in this process as it stands now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And we will say to them, right, great. This will be the first time we will actually have a pool of Indigenous staff coming through, because in the past we just haven't seen it. So this is just one way to try, and then through my team we can contact the ICOs and say, right, we've got 5 staff from your university that could potentially be nominated for an Indigenous award, and we can, and some of the staff will say, oh, I don't feel like I'm ready yet. And so that's where we might put them with a mentor, and they can have a discussion with the mentor and say, right, these are the sorts of things you might need to do. This is what we can do to help you develop the application. Speak to your support in the institution, but we think you've got a good case to go forward.
And sorry, just one other question. When you say this is for Aboriginal staff only, and I'm really, really pleased that condition's actually now in there. Oh. But is in terms of, it's following on from Simone's question as well about teams. I know in the past, teams of staff have been put up for the award, and that might have been led by an Indigenous person, but it included non-Indigenous people. Are these teams now only strictly Indigenous, or is it a combination? Is it like Indigenous led?
I would be quite happy, and we haven't really discussed this, and we can reach a decision on this probably right now, but I would be happy to see a team which is has to have an Indigenous member in the team. Doesn't have to be fully Indigenous, but definitely an Indigenous member in the team. Whether the Indigenous person is leading or is a member, I'm proposing that now, and maybe proposing it to this group even, to see what your thoughts are.
I'm actually in 2 minds. I like the idea that it's Aboriginal only. So I can't give you an immediate, concrete answer now. But I like the idea that it's Indigenous.
I would sort of, I'm with Darlene as well. It's sort of two minds. I mean, we at QUT we probably only have 5 Indigenous staff, but some of these Indigenous staff lead large like a team of tutors, etc., because we're sort of like going, well, how do we build capacity so then we can then bring in more Indigenous staff? So it's great, Indigenous, but maybe there's a criteria around, is the Indigenous person the lead or the unit chair or the coordinator, like some sort of tag as such, rather than just being a PhD student who's doing some work. I don't know, just a thought.
Susan?
Yeah, so I guess I'm echoing both Peter and Darlene. The thing that sometimes happens, and we've seen it with research grants, that, you know, if it's opened up to everybody, then you get the token Indigenous person who's kind of dragged in to go on the research grant. And I think I agree with Darlene that this is a really good move, and we wouldn't want to see that undermined. So I'm not absolutely saying no, but I do think it needs some careful thinking through what the position of the Indigenous person is and what the position of the non-Indigenous team members might be. I mean, I'll just say, I've seen some, I've been reviewing journal papers recently, and I've seen some examples that I wouldn't want to see come through this scheme, where there's a bit of tokenism, I think. Yeah.
So, you know, we've got, you know, it's good that you've raised this because we hadn't thought this through, actually. We just assumed, you know, Indigenous and if they were part of a team, they were really a part of a team. They're not the token member. They have to contribute and show leadership or offer input. That's what we would expect. And just like with all the awards, when they put in a team, we do ask them to say, you know, what was the role of each of the individual team members. So I think we could open it up to teams that are focused on, you know, embedding Indigenous perspectives in the curriculum, but each team member having to clearly outline their contribution. We could do that. That could be one way, or we could just go, no, it's going to be a fully Indigenous. You have to be an Indigenous member only. You have to be Indigenous, have an Indigenous background only to be part of this award scheme. So we've got two ways we can go here. We open it up and get people to justify their contribution. So we're opening up the process and see what we get first. And then if we need to narrow it, then we can narrow down. How would that sound?
I suppose for myself, I would be echoing the sentiments. I think if there's a number of categories and there's only one Indigenous category, I'm a little bit hesitant for then the person to be winning that category to be non-Indigenous. And I think we have an immense amount of talent out there that may not be being recognised because of different hurdles that Aboriginal staff face, that non-Indigenous staff face.
Sadie, sorry, Sadie, can I just jump in there, because I think maybe I wasn't coming across clear, but I was thinking of the teams having Indigenous and non-Indigenous. But are you suggesting just fully Indigenous teams? Is that what you're suggesting?
I think we have some really I completely understand it. I'm happy to go with the general consensus, but I do think we have some really dynamic teams out there that, you know, most of the staff may be more junior academics, but that doesn't mean that they lack in experience, because they may have gotten PhDs a long time down the track, or they lack in knowledge and diversity of perspective. My other question was just very, very quickly, I was wondering if there was cultural safety or cultural competency training around the mentors, because as I was reaching out to teaching staff, I did receive some feedback that one staff member had reached the point of mentorship and then gotten quite negative feedback from a mentor, probably because there may not be to have a great alignment between the practice of an Aboriginal academic working with Aboriginal students in Aboriginal studies and an academic that might be working in a different discipline and have different ways of teaching. And so I just really wanted to just highlight that very quickly, that maybe just double checking that the mentors are in the right heads. I'm sure they're all brilliant, but are in the right headspace and have the training so that, you know, everybody's very open-minded, I suppose.
Yeah, thanks for raising that.
When I was talking to teams, I was actually referring to Indigenous teams only. So I just wondered, and I'm similar in understanding the perspectives. Are there other opportunities for citations and awards which actually allows for teams, which is both non-Indigenous and Indigenous? So that could be the alternative if we decide to keep this Indigenous only. So that's just a comment. But my context, in my asking, it was about an Indigenous team.
Okay, great. Yep. And Gary?
I just wanted some clarification because a number of times it's been spoken about, so an Indigenous academic teaching in Indigenous areas. So I'm just questioning, you know, there might be an Indigenous academic out there who is the leader in assessing in their discipline for the entire country or something like that. So we just make sure that we're ensuring that, Aboriginal academics do a whole heap of different work and a lot of work, not just in Indigenous content.
Yeah, so Gary, that's a good point. So the staff member has to be Indigenous, and the sense I'm taking away from this meeting is, even if it's a team, we'd want all the team members to be Indigenous. That's the sense I'm getting at the moment. Provided they meet the categories, to go for the Neville Bonner Award, they have to meet assessment categories under citations, and they have to meet one of the 4 criteria. That's approaches to teaching and learning that support learning, influence, motivate, and inspire students, development of curricula, resources and services, provide effective assessment practices, or show innovation or leadership that has influenced or enhanced learning. So they have to address one of those.
Making sure that we're clear that, an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander academic might teach Indigenous content within their discipline, but they also might teach, first year mathematics and be the best in the institution about that. And, so just to make sure that the award is essentially for an Indigenous body in recognition of their excellence.
Yep, that's correct. That's correct. Provided they address one of those criteria.
Yes, absolutely.
That's absolutely correct. Thank everyone. I found this was a really great meeting. Great to meet you all in person and to hear your perspectives, to come to hear the voices, the Indigenous voices. I mean, a great collection of fantastic academics and professional staff in this room. So I really appreciate it. It's really sort of helped us think through the Neville Bonner Award, and I think we will stick to Indigenous only or Indigenous teams fully, each member being an Indigenous team. I think we'll go down that path for this year, and let's see how we go. So we're hoping at the end of this that you will be able to think of Indigenous teaching staff that would be suitable for a Neville Bonner Award. So we've got a link to the Neville Bonner brochure, which you can download. We've got a link to the Universities Australia website.
The online form has been sent to all the DVCs and PVC Indigenous.
Okay, so that means everyone in this room would have received that email?
Yep.
That's correct. Okay, great. So they can fill out that form and then return it following those instructions. Thank you so much, everyone, and please feel free to reach out if you've got any questions.